You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Prison Talk with Jamie Meade and
Emma Charleston.
in this episode, we thought it would be very important to cover a topic of victim sensitivity and victims' rights. In the last two episodes, we have been discussing mandatory minimums and how judges should have the discretion. And on the last episode, we were talking about second look sentencing. But we have been focusing on the offender in both of those episodes. And we wanted to address in this episode more on the victims, the rights that victims have, and the fact that we cannot overlook the victims and what they have to say about our release from prison.
Because they would have to have a say in it, surely.
Yes, and in Michigan, like many other states, there are statutory rights. Victims are notified if they keep their address on file with the Department of Corrections. They are notified of when any offender that commits a crime against them are about to be released from prison. So because they have a right to, make a statement at the parole board hearing, or they actually have a right to request that the prosecutor appeal. In the state of Michigan, the legislators passed a law that restricts the right of the offender to appeal a parole board decision, but it gives the right to the victim or the victim's family to appeal a decision from the parole board to release offenders. So they have the right to challenge and potentially stop a parole.
And I think that's fair. What stops it though from turning into just plain revenge? Do they care? Should anyone care?
And it matters what county you are coming from. In Michigan, because we have multiple counties. I'm not sure exactly how many, but it does matter, because if you're from a more conservative county, the prosecutor may take a vengeful stance and not stop from fighting to prevent a release of an offender.
Yeah.
And when it comes to lifers, or life with the possibility of parole, or life without the possibility of parole, or someone that has the parole board has taken interest for a commutation, you have to go through a public hearing.
Yeah.
And during that public hearing, victims or any member of the public has the right to speak at those hearings live in front of the offender and in front of the parole board and the attorney general.
Yeah.
So they can express their desire that you stay in prison.
I think that's pretty fair. I don't know how people that are in prison might feel about that, but I think that's pretty fair.
Well, that is a fine line. It is a fine line that offenders, they must keep that in mind. You, especially those of us convicted of a homicide, that victim is not going to return. And that's what the family, we have to, you have to realize, you have to have empathy and sympathy for those victims, the family, because if you don't put yourself in their shoes, I mean, if someone harms your family member and you're an offender, you would want, normally most offenders say, revenge.
Yeah.
And so, but most law-abiding citizens, their revenge is incarceration or the death penalty, if you're in states with the death penalty.
Maybe I'm an offender then, because I tend to. That's what I mean by revenge, because I would be. Well, maybe I'd show some mercy, but I just think I would have that, that stereotypical lock them up, throw away the key. Like, it's one thing. Yeah. It is one thing when you're talking to people that haven't hurt any of me, me or mine. But it would be a completely different story, I think, if it was one of my family. I think I'd be really annoying to the offender, but I wouldn't care. So I think it's good that they get the chance to say what they have to say. But just because they say it doesn't mean that they won't be released. Like, I mean, does it allow, a person, filled with, hatred or dislike or sadness or whatever to stop someone that's actually deserving of a chance? Or is it just something they take into consideration? Because I suppose you've got to be, like, that's not really just, is it? Fair.
No, and it is something they take. It is something they take into consideration, and that is a difficult topic for many to talk about. And where I've taken two classes, one in victimology and one in victim sensitivity, or victim advocacy, and it's very what I've learned through those classes and through other psych classes, that sometimes, there should be a program, or there should be some type of reconciliation program that allows, the victim to have closure. And the focus should be on the victim. And that involves the offender.
Yeah.
Because there are cases, and we have a lot of it on, true crime TV and different channels in the United States that show that when the victim's family of a homicide victim get together with the offender, and actually sometimes it brings true closure. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. We've even seen instances where they become really good friends, and that person that's sitting on death row or serving life is actually the only visit they get is from the victim's mother or sister or grandmother, because they've taken a true love or a like to helping that person, although he's serving life.
Yeah,
it helps the offender.
I've seen an interview with one woman who's, I think both her sons were killed by somebody, and she was, at the trial, she was, calling for leniency of this other person, and they didn't know each other beforehand, and I do remember thinking, wow, I don't know how you come to that thing, but and it's good for it. Obviously, it's good for her. It's good for the victim to be able to get closure. Why? What for?
Yeah. For closure is because the hardship that an individual that has taken the life of someone and taken it at an early age is, it's extremely difficult psychologically and emotionally for family members and loved ones and friends to deal with. And it is something that, it's very difficult a hump that's very difficult to get over. And there's different, and it doesn't mean that reconciliation with the offender works for everyone, because it doesn't.
No, I imagine it a lot.
And I always say,
you have 1 minute remaining.
I always say in the United States with our listeners, because Emma is in Australia, so we're always comparing different judiciary systems
and ideas. And just the fact that
so
America is very weird with their locking up people. Just anyone, you and you, to prison. That's what it seems like to me sometimes. It does seem that ridiculous to me.
Well,
part 2.
Our phone call is about to end. We only got about 10 minutes in on this one, but we will continue on the next call in 15 minutes when I'm available to call back.
So
and we'll continue our conversation with victim rights and victim sensitivity.
This might even be 3 phone calls.
It could be.
Because I've got some questions. I've got some things to say. All right, so we'll be back. Bye.
Yes. Bye-bye.